Hi, and welcome to the Creating Value in Schools podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by guest Aldaine Wynter, teacher, school leader, and champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Aldaine has trained, taught, and been a school leader in the UK and is currently Director of International-Mindedness, Diversity, and Inclusion at Washington International School in the US. So today we want to dig into how we can create change in schools through DEI strategies. But I think first, Aldaine, it would be great to hear a bit about how you came to be in your role. What's the journey that's taken you to where you are now?
Well, thank you. That's a lovely introduction. I started off, as many of us do in the UK, having done a PGCE in maths and physics at UCL. I have always been passionate about education and thought, okay, I'm going to do right out of doing an engineering degree as my undergrad. And so there was no gap. I went from undergrad straight to PGCE. And then I had the fortune of being in an international school for my first teaching placement, which is very unusual, but I was lucky and grateful because that's really what started the thought around, okay, not only should you be considering teaching, but you should be considering leadership at that. And so I was at the Dwight School in London. I recommend and praise them a lot for the way in which they give a foundation for their teachers, their ability to give PD both internally and externally, what led me to a position where I could consider leadership without a doubt. I knew it was going to happen. And so through that, within a few years, I became assistant head of pastoral, and then within 3 months became head of pastoral. And then from head of pastoral, I was working very hard. And then we had 2020, and I also became the DEI lead for Dwight London and really started working on at the time, which was something quite innovative for us, was looking at anti-racist curriculum and anti-racist PD. And so that took form in for the curriculum. We had an inclusive curriculum, which highlighted Black voices in history from kindergarten through to year 13. So just doing an order of the curriculum, trying to figure out, okay, what is where. And that was really possible because we had amazing teachers, the head of history, head of English, the grade coordinators in the primary school made it possible because they were so willing to, and the head of drama, I should say, they made it possible. It was easy for me to say, okay, it's not about making you do anything that you don't already have. It's about figuring out what do we have and what would we like to see if we had a 2-year plan. And so that was a curriculum piece. And then from a PD piece, we had book club over the summer where people got assigned a themed book club in May. I hand delivered to teachers and staff as well, ground staff, catering, all three. They had a choice. For example, one year we had a theme around race. So we had 8 options where people could choose what book they would like to read. One year we had it around feminism and gender equality. Another year we had it around LGBTQ. And another year we had around disabilities. And so each year there was a different theme. We would get these books in May, June time, ready for the summer break. We'd come back in September and we would break out into our individual groups based on what you had read. And then we just had a discussion, and it became part and parcel of what we did at the beginning of the year, a way of reconnecting, super easy. Typically happened in the first day of actually returning. And then from there, we'd have a film club with a similar idea in the winter, where you would pick a film that you were going to watch just before the winter break. And then we'd come back in January and do something very similar, depending on what film or series you'd watched. And then at the end of the year, we did like a multimedia approach where we'd give a range of articles, podcasts like yourself, short films, opinion pieces. And then again, we would go back into these groups post Easter break, and this was in May, and to have discussions, what we were reading, what we were seeing, and how it was applicable not just to current affairs at the time, but also just the environment of the school. And that initiative is ultimately what I know got us the award from ISA, the Independent Schools Association, for our work on DEI. And from there, I was like, okay, this is something that I'm passionate about, that I really enjoy. And I was fortunate enough to go from that position and essentially just skyrocket into the position that I'm in now. And I'm sure it'll come up later, but just doing amazing things.
Brilliant. Thank you. And yes, Aldaine, when we first talked about, even just a couple of months ago, doing a podcast, let's talk about your role around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That didn't feel like a controversial topic. However, you are in the US, you're in Washington. So how does it feel to be in a role as a diversity and inclusion lead at this point in time?
I would say that I'm really lucky. I seem to be able to time all of my jobs perfectly. I was head of pastoral, and then 2 months later, we went into the pandemic. And now I've chosen to do in diversity and inclusion role in the US. And then subsequently, there's been a lot of turmoil when it comes to the topic. But what I would say is I'm lucky enough to be in an incredibly supportive school. And both my heads of school and my associate head of school, I can genuinely say that they believe in the work. And so we've not had to change course on with the work. If anything, we've just been able to really showcase it, vocalize it with pride that, we are proud to have the initiatives that we have, to have the relationships with certain organizations that we have, such as the Human Rights Campaign. And we take a lot of pride in that. I just came off a few weeks ago celebrating Women's History Month by taking faculty, staff, and some students to watch the Washington, D.C. women's soccer game in DC. So these are things we promote. We're proud of it. And I think our parents are at our school because they believe in our mission and our core values. And that's what we kind of always have to fall back on when we think about how certain elements of my work are being, we will say, highlighted. We'll use a positive word. So it is, I think right now, my concern is more about ensuring that our families and our students know that our school is a safe place for them today. It was a safe place for them yesterday, and it will continue to be a safe place for them in the future.
That's brilliant. It's good to know that you have that support and things continue in that positive way. So tell us then a bit about the areas that you're focusing on in your role at the moment, because I know you've got some core strands of activity. So tell us about what they are, perhaps a bit about and how it's those things that you feel are the areas to focus on.
Mm. So one of the big things that we've been working on for the past perhaps year and a half is looking at how we can take data and use data to inform the practices and the initiatives that we're trying to spearhead. So I've been really fortunate to have gotten all faculty and staff to complete an intercultural development inventory survey. And that was last academic year, just trying to really get a foundation when it comes to like, how do we use data to show our community where we're at. And the IDI, which shouldn't be confused with my own title, so the Intercultural Development Inventory, gives an organization a continuum, and it places them on this continuum, and it gives them a sense of, okay, all the people in your organization, if you were to average their scores from the survey that are testing and giving them scenarios, um, it places you on this continuum that has 5 orientations. And from there, you are able to sit down and actually figure out an action plan. And what we've also been able to do is take select members of the WIS community and give them individual debrief. So as well as seeing from an organizational point of view where they lie. They can actually see where they are as individuals on this 5-step continuum. And it gives them the opportunity to have a personal plan in respect to the work, as well as having an organizational plan. And that's been really powerful because I'm thinking about the future. The aim is to really put us in a place where the language is this common practice beyond the fact that we're also unique in the fact that we use IDI instead of DEI, and we have a real emphasis on international mindedness. And that really does inform the work. A lot of the initiatives have this sense of, okay, are we thinking about it from an international mindedness point of view? Because our students, our parents, and a lot of our faculty and staff are from abroad. And so really understanding their cultural norms that they're bringing to the school, as well as having a respect of the norms that we are as an American, like an international school in America, are really significant. And I think this really brings home that point because it's intercultural. It's the understanding that culture is important and that we all experience it in different ways. And it plays a significant part in how we show up at work. So that's definitely something we've taken a lot of pride in, just from a data point of view. And I also think the way in which we engage our community. One of my favorite things that I get to do every month is the IDI profile, both the video and the written format, where we have the opportunity for the video to take a member of the community and just sit down and speak to them for 5 minutes about how a particular month, whether it be Black History Month, Women's History Month, how that impacts them, what it means to them, and what they would like the community to know with respect to that.
Thing, yes, because clearly that's important, isn't it? Because your job title is Director of International-Mindedness, Inclusion and Diversity. So that reflects your particular situation and where you are. As you say, it's international school, so people of many different backgrounds and communities. And so what else are the other strands of activity you're working on?
Yes, I'm fortunate enough to have a great team. So I've got two coordinators who are in the primary school. I've got one in the middle school, one in the upper school, and then one that looks at cross-divisional ways in which we can approach certain things. So being able to bring to the community performances that really either link into the curriculum or have a piece of, okay, we're going to educate you whilst performing. So we're not just simply going to, for example, we brought in a Mexican folk dancing company for Hispanic Heritage Month, and it wasn't just a performance, it was a travel through Latin America and a sense of, okay, what is the significance of the dances, the music, the instruments, the costumes? And they were explaining that in between doing the different performances. And so they were able to leave with a sense of, okay, I saw this performance and I should be able to tell you the significance of, the white and the red trim, the fact that it's used in traditional environment to be used for a wedding. And so little things like that is what we hope. And then we go to the other end where we were able to bring in Ava Clark, who is a Holocaust survivor who was born actually in the concentration camps and was, had the opportunity to escape 2 days before the Americans came in. And that story was incredibly impactful for the upper school students who got to experience it. But also we had an opportunity to have a Q&A with faculty and staff after the fact as well. And so to be able to bring in someone who's based in Cambridge, UK, and bring that to the students is, I think I'm really focusing on the experiences that I'm able to put in front of the students and the faculty and seeing how do we ensure that it has a lasting impact? Are we just doing something for doing something's sake, or are we continuing this relationship? So, for example, with Ava Clark, we hope to actually bring her back when we start exploring a book club that we're looking to do for next year as well. And just really recognizing an amazing speaker isn't just going to be a one-time thing, and figuring out, okay, we have an amazing English department that's looking into how they explore Jewish voices, and they were interested in speaking to Ava about, okay, can we connect it to the curriculum? So we take an assembly in terms of how it started, and we look at, okay, it looks like it can become potential PD, and hearing her voice and how it relates to the book and the theme that we're trying to explore next year. We're looking at, okay, from a curriculum piece, what's already in the curriculum that could be complemented by having a speaker such as Ava Clark really brings, it really just brings books and text to life. You know, there's something that you can't gain through a a textbook, through even a YouTube clip, that is just so different when you've got the person in front of you, able to ask questions and answer them in real time, see the emotion. When she spoke, the silence in the room just gave you a sense of the significance.
Right. Thank you. Yes, that's right. Because it's an all-through school, isn't it? With Washington International School. So that must be really quite interesting that you're thinking about curriculum and experiences right from the very smallest children all the way to your people who are close to going off to university. And yes, so you touched there on, so I suppose you're looking at everything and thinking about links into the curriculum as well as, yeah, potential for staff development opportunities. So, how much input do you have into curriculum design? Is it the case that, I suppose, with a core mission or value of the school being around international mindedness, is that kind of in the curriculum already? Have you influenced it? Has that changed in the time that you've been there?
I had the pleasure of being able to work quite closely with both the director of teaching and learning for the primary school and for the high school. And so I am involved quite a lot with the auditing. So I just did a big audit of the curriculum to see where we have Black and Jewish voices and histories represented. And that was again preschool through grade 12 or year 13. And that was it it's a heck of a document. It's probably 50 pages. And so I'm currently synthesizing it, and just to have a visual representation of it so we can use in PD, which is starting to look really cool. And so I have and for example, the primary school, I'm in the planning meetings and have the opportunity to like sit with people whilst they're planning their units. And what's interesting, like you mentioned, being in a through school, your approach within the primary school is so different to when you approach it in the high school. Um, it is it's completely different beast. You know, the way the mindset of, okay, when you go into a primary school setting, how you need to adapt for them and how the performance is, even when you try and think about, okay, who could we bring in? That's very different because the time allotted within the primary setting is very different to the time allotted for the older students, even from an assembly point of view. But I get in for the older students, there is a specific section in their unit plans that says, what are your IDI, your international mindedness, diversity and inclusion pieces in this particular unit? And so I will go, last year I went and I met with every department just to kind of go through, okay, what do you currently have? How can we elevate this? And we really had this sense of, okay, we want to emphasize, particularly within the English and the humanities, a sense of joy. You know, when we are doing Black history, we don't want to emphasize and only be talking about slavery. When we are talking about Jewish voices in history, we don't want the emphasis to only be on the Holocaust. You know, we want to understand that that is significant and it makes a huge impact, and the students need to know it, but they also need to have a sense of joy when it pertains to these particular communities as well. So it's been fun. It's only been a year and a half, but fun.
And have you brought, you talked earlier at the beginning about the book club and film club initiative that you worked on at Dwight. So have you been able to bring some of that over into the staff development?
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah, so I started off the initiative in the UK with everyone gets a book, everyone's going to go into their groups based on what they picked. For this year, we've actually changed it up a little bit. So I've actually made an optional book club, which is open to faculty and parents. And the international piece is we have the theme is this year we've actually chosen a theme of race, but we've actually got a book in English, in French, and in Spanish because we are a full immersion school for early years and then we are bilingual from grade one. So our students speak either French or Spanish amongst other languages. So I really wanted to have, okay, how do I keep this piece in mind? And so we've got 3 book options that cover this theme of race. And we sent it out to parents and said, hey, if you would like to join, please sign up. You get a free book. Well, I think the first 5 get a free book. And then we had 2 virtual sessions, and then we have an in-person session where we're going to come in. I'm sure there'll be wine and small bites, and then we're going to have this discussion, so faculty and parents, and we've had a really good number. So yes, and we are going to continue it next year. But just we're going to have a different theme. I have the theme in mind. I'm going to leave it as a surprise just in case. And yeah, it's been going really well. The parents have really kind of enjoyed kind of interacting with the faculty, and the faculty have enjoyed being able to talk about a text, but in a way in which this doesn't necessarily link directly into what they're doing, but does link in with current affairs. For example, the English text is cast, which is such a relevant text in this moment. So it's been great to get the insights and the experiences from both the faculty and from the parents, because again, they come from different parts. For many, the book cast is it focuses in on kind of the American caste system as it pertains to kind of slavery, the German Nazi, and then the caste system based in India. And so even that book alone touches on different themes from an international perspective. And then again, we were also very conscious of not having one book that's been translated. We wanted books that were written in English, French, and Spanish. So they are 3 separate books, but cover the same theme. Yeah, really exciting. And next year we're looking to add another media piece as well. So we are probably going to do a film and series. It's just about doing it in a way that kind of complements the schedules for the parents and faculty.
When it comes to thinking about impact, I guess it's important, isn't it? You want the work you're doing to be making a difference, having a discernible change. But I suppose I don't know how easy that is. So yeah, what are your kind of approaches to impact evaluation, monitoring? How do you decide where are we going to go next? What's working?
So I think the first thing that I did was to focus on the relationship within the community, kind of making sure that I was visible. So we are 3 divisions, but we're across 2 sites. And it was really important for me to be visible on both sides. So I spend 2.5 days at the primary school, and then I spend 2.5 days at the high school. And that was really important, first and foremost, so that there are some evaluations that are purely word of mouth. People who will come and say to you, hey, you're doing this. Have you considered? And those are really important, and they only happen if you're visible. You need to be around so that people feel confident enough to come and say to you an opinion that they might have. But then on the other side, we do a lot of evaluations, particularly my team when it comes to professional development. And I will send an evaluation form to anyone that goes, for example, to a 2-day or more IDI themed conference, just so that we can figure out, okay, what did you think about it? What's the impact? Would you suggest sending someone else there? And we collate this. So at the end of the year, I will be able to look and say, okay, people really recommended this. We also are able to figure out the identities of those who are going and where they sit. Are we finding that more Black faculty are going to some events, are more Asian faculty, are more white faculties? And so we're able to split that up around, okay, we had this many IGI related conferences or opportunities, and we had no Hispanic educators going. And so if that were the case, I can say, okay, next year I'm going to look at opportunities that they might consider and ensure that this is on the selection. And I also will do evaluations on my own personal PD. So I've currently built a program called the Wisdom Power Program, where we take faculty of color from all three divisions and we meet once a month. We get an expert in front of them to speak on some form of skill development, potentially ahead of school as well. And at the end of all of those sessions, we also send an evaluation. Did you like the theme? How was the speaker? You know, are you able to take what you've learned today and apply it in what you've been doing? And so it's about, it's a combination of being visible so that you can get the informal, I heard this, but also having the data to say, okay, we're hearing this from you. And we've got data pieces from students, from faculty, from parents. Like, so I have little pieces of that as well. And it can be even qualitative. I have drop-in sessions for parents for 25 this year, and it'll be parents of Black students, parents of LGBT students, parents of girls, parents of boys, parents of international, and so on. It can be quite time consuming, but for me, there's nothing more important than hearing from members of your community, because ultimately that's who you're meant to be serving. So if you're not listening, then, what are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, and actually that sounds like a great piece of advice. Start by listening, because I wanted to perhaps ask you, based on your experiences so far, what advice would you have for other inclusion diversity leads? Maybe someone who's starting out, or perhaps some people who may be in a school situation when there isn't much funding to draw on. What can you do? What would be a good starting point? What would be your advice?
I think you need to gather information from people, both formally and informally, because you need the information in order to meet the community where they are. In each school that I've worked in, the DEI needs have varied based on just the community. Some are more progressive, some are more attuned to the terminology, some have the enthusiasm but don't necessarily have the framework of the foundation. And that's something that you can't necessarily figure out just by observing. You do need to speak to people. And you need to spend some time doing that before you put in the big initiatives. I spent a year really just speaking to people, figuring out, okay, what do I think they need? What am I hearing? What does that translate to? Before I started doing any of the quite big work, a lot of my major initiatives really kicked in this year after spending a year listening to people. I did drop-in session. I did start my drop-in sessions with parents my first year of starting WIS. So I was able to meet with technically every constituent, because my drop-in sessions could accommodate every parent. We had IDI drop-in sessions for all to begin and to end. And then we had our kind of other breakdowns. And so it was anyone who was willing to come. I met with each department in my first year. So from an academic point of view, I wasn't telling them what units they needed to change straight away. I was just listening to their thoughts on, okay, how things are going. How do you find this section of the unit plan? What would you like to see? And also just speaking to my team, whilst I'm the inaugural director for IDI, but prior to me, there were coordinators and liaisons in place. So I actually just spoke to them before I even started the role to figure out how they kind of found the role, what were they thinking, speaking to affinity group leaders again, what do you do? How do you feel? What would you like to see? It's You can't underestimate the significance of speaking to people. And don't get me wrong, you'll speak to them and you'll do an initiative and it still won't go down. But you will have spoken to them, and you have spoken to them, and therefore I think you can access them a lot easier when you're trying to get feedback. So that would be my advice. Speak to people so that you can meet the community where they are.
That makes sense. And I feel that actually probably feeds into what was going to be my next question, which is about getting people on board. It sounds like, you've worked with some great, subject leaders, school leaders who've really been wanting to embrace what you're doing and look at ways of making changes. But yes, I imagine not some people, for some people they might not quite be there yet, or there might be something they're concerned about. So yeah, any further tips, suggestions for bringing people on the journey with you?
Yeah, I think being diverse in your approach, ironically, is really important. I think especially being British like yourself, our version and what I put in place when I was in London is different to what they needed when being in the US, even though they're both international schools. When I was global lead for Dwight and I was looking at London, New York, Shanghai, Korea, again, they all need a certain approach. And in some instances where you're finding resistance, you need to figure out, okay, where is the resistance coming from? Is there something historical that you're not aware of that might be hampering your efforts? Is it purely, I do not want to do this, in which case that's fine. You need to know that there's a certain amount of effort that you can put in and it's still not going to make a difference. But what in those circumstances will help is cultural expectations and norm. For us, I believe that I can confidently say IDI is what the school is. It's a part of the values. It's one of the key ones. It's inclusion. We carry ourselves with integrity as well as being inquisitive with our approach. And it's important just to understand people. And if you've got one person who just doesn't get it, go and figure out what part of the work they will get. Because inclusion, diversity, international-mindedness is for everyone. We just need to figure out where do we need to put you in order for you to really, for that light bulb to go off? Because there'll be a place.
Thank you. Any particular highlights or successes or things that you would want to mention?
I would say, I think I've mentioned it already, but the IDI profiles are things I take huge pride in. I think it's one thing to do it because for me, it was an opportunity to connect with community members. And sometimes I am asking people, like, who do you think should be on it? And then getting to speak to them and then having a good time. And it's not long, but it is really interesting to hear some people's insights beyond their subject specialism. And I really enjoy it. And what I've really liked hearing is a lot of them will get emails and responses to either their video or their written post, being like, oh, it was really nice. It was good to get another side of you. And that to me is amazing. And I'm not getting these emails. I'm just hearing from them. Oh, yeah, like people have emailed me to say they enjoyed the video or they enjoyed the written spotlight. And so doing a newsletter, you're always wary that, gosh, is anyone really reading this? And I started a brand new newsletter, yet another email for parents and faculty to have to read. But those moments where the people who are putting in effort and time to kind of speak to me, and them getting any form of positive critiques, that makes me feel good. Um, and I think right now this year, I started the Wisdom Power program where we bring in the faculty of color from all three divisions to meet monthly and bring in experts. So that's been a huge sense of pride. In international independent institutions, you don't necessarily get that many people of color and what we've done is to say we recognize that whilst the numbers may be small in your division, when you bring them together, they are larger than you think. And it's, in my mind, it's about building community, raising opportunities, and it's like a spotlight. It's showing that we see you, we acknowledge that you are there, whether you're few in numbers or not. The program is optional, and so we've had a good amount. We've had about 15 sign up this year. And I would hope that next year, with the promotion of the current participants, that it grows each year, because it's seeing them each month being like, wow, there's so many of you when you actually can come together. That's, I think, definitely been something I've taken the most pride in, from the faculty point of view. So, yeah.
Thank you. Amazing. I think building community, that's a good way to
Mhm.
look at so much of what you're doing, isn't it? And I think lastly, just wanted to ask you for any reading or listening recommendations.
Mm.
Anything else you've been reading lately or listening to that has inspired you?
This is going to be an easy answer, but I think if you are based in the US and you're not from the US, the cast book that I mentioned is such an important read. You know, I recommend anyone who is attempting to do the work read and understands that book. It gives you a really and there's a young adults version as well, but it gives you a really clear understanding about the significance of race in America. And it's not to say that race is the only aspect of DEI that is significant, but it is a huge part of the US kind of history, and you as an individual need to understand it. I think you do yourself a disservice if you go in and you're not fully read up on it, if that makes sense. And then I listen to a lot of podcasts, to be fair. So I normally start my day with either Politics Joe, which is UK politics, because it's important to start on that, and then I'll switch from UK politics to LBC, and then I'll go to BBC World News. So I think, and for me, the podcast and politics side of things is really important, and the news agents back to the UK. So a lot of politics podcasts, because I think inadvertently the work is always political. There's always a foundation where you can go back to, okay, why am I doing this? What do I stand for?
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, so well, we wish you all the best with the next stages of your programs, and it'd be great to catch up again and hear how it's all going. Thank you so much, Aldaine.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.